Welcome everybody to the second episode of the EU and Me podcast. This week we are going to be talking about the climate crisis, and we have two very special guests. First up, we have Iacopo Russo, a PhD student from the University of Cambridge with a thesis focused on sustainable manufacturing. Hello, Iacopo, welcome.
Hi Dermot, hi Paco, nice to be here.
Nice to have you. And we're also joined by Ana Morgado, another PhD student in engineering from Cambridge, building efficiency metrics to decarbonise industries. Hello, Ana.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
It's our pleasure. So over to you, Paco.
Yeah, so I'll start with the first question, guys. And I will say, it might seem banal, but I will go back to the basics. I want to know what actually climate change is. What I mean is, like, there is a lot of talking everywhere in the media, but often, like, my impression is that it remains a bit almost as an abstract concept. So I'm not looking that much for a scientific definition, although you can give us that as well, but more like I would like for you to tell us what in concrete terms this mean, and like with perhaps some example, what are the risks we are facing? And I would start with Iacopo.
Yeah, so I suppose news about climate change have been more frequent in the last few years. And it is now increasingly framed as what it is, which is an emergency, a global climate emergency, which is caused by the greenhouse effect, which is a natural effect which keeps the atmosphere of the Earth warm, but by increasing the concentration of greenhouse gases, of these gases in the atmosphere, the temperature of the Earth is rising. And this is causing a whole sort of set of problems for the climate around the world, including increased forest fires and desertification of some areas of the world, and a decrease in the areas that we can grow crops on, that we can grow food on. And many of these effects can already be seen. In fact, scientists in different parts of the world, in the US, in Europe, and in Japan, have been measuring the temperature of the Earth for many decades now. And independently, they have all seen the same thing. The temperature has been rising by about 1 degree Celsius since 1850, since the records began. And it is predicted to increase by many more degrees by the end of this century, which would have rather catastrophic effects on the Earth's climate. So it's an emergency that will affect people, first of all, because if there's less food to grow and less areas are habitable, people will have to migrate, people will have to move. And we have seen how many problems migration already creates in Europe. And it is also an emergency for the animal world. I've seen recent statistics from the WWF, and by the end of this century, a fifth of all wild species are in danger of extinction because of climate change. So it's a danger for people and for the ecosystems that inhabit our planet.
And when you say like that is 1 degree Celsius, like, can you give it like historically? Do you have can you give us a perception?
Yes.
Of what that means?
So I actually checked, and it seems like this. So the rise in temperature is caused by the increased concentration of gases, as I said, and the last time the concentration is currently at of CO2, which is the main greenhouse gas. It's at 410 parts per million. And to give you, and to put that in context, the last time the concentration was this high was between 3 and 5 million years ago. And at that time, the temperature was 2 to 3 degrees higher than it is now. And the sea levels were 10 to 20 degrees high, 10 to 20 meters higher, sorry. which means that many of the cities that are on the coast today would be completely underwater. So it's it may seem as a very small increase, but because it's an average, there are some parts of the world that are warming a lot more. So, for example, we're seeing the ice sheets in the Arctic melting very fast, and this is extremely problematic.
Okay, that is really clear. Something to add, Anna?
Yeah, I was just something that it's interesting in the situations that, in fact, and it's used a lot about climate crisis denialists, is that climate has been changing for the entire history of the Earth, and that is true. But what is completely different this time is, as the statistics that Iacopo showed clearly highlight, is the pace and how fast it is happening right now, and also that is the first time that it's caused by one single species on Earth. So if we see why the levels of CO2 are rising since the 1800s, is because there was industrial revolution. We started burning fossil fuels, the concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere started rising, and that's really up to us. There was other events in history where this happened as well, but we're talking about volcanoes, big eruptions. It was not one single species doing it all and in such a short amount of time. And I think that's why it is a real crisis. And if we humans can make it, we also have to be the ones that come up with the solution for it.
Okay, really interesting. Good point there that it's just been one species doing everything. I hadn't really thought about that in the past. So sticking with you, Anna, you might want to answer this question first for us. What is the timeline of action we're looking at now if we want to change this climate change? Is the situation even still reversible? You touched on the Industrial Revolution, and I know it seems pretty well accepted that there are some industries that can't change completely now. Would you be correct? Would it be correct in saying that? And could you develop a bit on what's reversible and maybe what's not reversible?
I don't think that at this point it is reversible. And I know this can be a debatable question, but the reason why I don't think so is because climate effects have long-term impacts. So what we are doing now will only have an impact in the longer run. It's very difficult at the point where we are right now, even if we shut everything down, to accomplish the 1.5% degrees Celsius of the Paris Agreement. We can do is create measures to mitigate the effects that we have, and that's really important. And it goes beyond pledges. So although the Paris Agreement was extremely important, and you do see pledges from governments all around the world, there are just that, pledges. And there's, I think, in my opinion, a lack of the change between what we say we want to do and concrete actions and concrete plans made to make it happen. So from what came out of the Paris Agreement were national determined contributions, but most countries have not come up with plans to put it in action. That's why it's very important, actually, COP26 that's coming next year, because they are supposed to present the concrete plans to reduce the emissions. And I'm very excited to see if we can step beyond words. But I'm afraid that at this point, climate change effects can be mitigated, we can adapt, but we won't be reversing its effects, what we came up to at this point in the short term. And when I say short term, it's the next decade.
Okay, Iacopo, do you share this view? Do you think we're beyond repair? Is it just a matter of time and we have to mitigate, as Anna said, or can we reverse the situation, in your opinion?
There is one word in Anna's response that resonates with me, which is adapt. I think rather than asking ourselves, is this reversible? The question we should be asking ourselves, can we adapt fast enough? And I think it is quite clear to everyone in the scientific community that at this pace of reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, climate change will not be reversed, global warming will not be reversed. This does not mean that we can just leave it as it is and do nothing, because every improvement in emission reductions that we achieve means that we have some more time to adapt to the changes that will inevitably take place. And although humans are an incredibly good at adapting, there has never been such a fast change in the history of humanity. And many other animal species that humans depend on, that ecosystems depend on, cannot adapt as fast. So what we need to do now is slow it down as much as possible, and reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases, so that ecosystems and human societies and in different countries have as much time as possible to adapt to the changes that will take place by the end of the century.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could just add that. So although I said it's not, I don't think it is reversible at this point, I don't want to seem like a doomsday Harold here. What I meant to say, and if that's just not an excuse for us not to have actions. So it might not be reversible immediately in our lifetime, but we do have a responsibility with the planet and with future generations and with nature. So we do need to do something, because actions that we can implement now will have an impact later on. And then we can go back to adapt the climate, and we to give species the opportunity to adapt back, as Iacopo said. And so I think I just wanted to make that clear, that it's not an excuse for inaction at all.
Definitely, most definitely. We have definitely a moral responsibility, I think, and after all, it's for our children and nephews as well. But you talk about the Paris Agreement, just to put a bit of context for who doesn't know what those are. They were in 2016, if I'm not wrong, now the sort of agreement involving many of the most important nations in the world. I think it was the first time, perhaps they tried in Kyoto before, but it was the first time some concrete initiative was taken in the international sphere now, in terms of putting all together and trying to solve the problem. So there is a global problem, I think, but then coming to Europe, in Europe, it seems somehow that things are changing. In the sense, there was way more attention in the past, I would say at least 10 years, and even more in the past 5 years, to green policies. The Green Party was the fastest growing party at the last election. They got a really good results. And also, like, the new European Commission seems to be more cautious, pay more attention to this theme. Does this give us hope for the future? What do you think? Is in Europe, like, can Europe become a model for other countries? And I'll keep on now because yeah.
Absolutely. It gives me a lot of hope to see the way Europe and the European Commission particularly is acting right now in terms of this climate crisis. They are trying a lot. So with the new recovery fund that came with COVID pandemic, but even before, with the modernization fund and the it's like Horizon EU, they have been doing a lot more attention into changing our economy and our industrial fabric into more sustainable and environmentally friendly ways of production and of living. And that gives me a lot of hope. Europe wants to be a leader in this transition, and it's clearly sending signs to its members that they need to adapt. Having said so, although this is very good, I still think we need more concrete plans. So as we've seen with national pledges and national determined contributions, you can say that you want to do something, but then you're not held accountable for it. So I think in the plans for this recovery fund, for instance, they should make clear targets, and we need to measure them at the end. See, well, you use that money, but now we want to see if you reach this level of emission reduction or energy saving or renewable energy penetration in your grid, number of electric car charging point for electric cars, retrofitting of houses, what was saved. So I do think that the only way to make this work, this good initiative, this good momentum that's going on in Europe, is we need to set targets and ways to communicate the results, to measure those results, and to be very transparent in the entire way that we're doing this.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned the recovery fund. I will just build 1 second on this and then give the question also to Iacopo after. But so I think this is a fundamental point. Not the recovery fund, like, was probably the most important European initiative of recent years, because it's the first time all European countries, are basically sharing a debt to answer to the. It was, of course, made to answer to the coronavirus crisis, to the pandemic, but actually, so an important part of that funding was supposed to be spent in green energy. And they say was supposed because, for who followed the debate, there were certain countries, the so-called frugal countries, who protested against this federal budget and protested against the amount of funding that were planned, and the initial budget suffered important cuts and in particular, these cuts regarded the federal budget, so the portion of the budget which had to be administered directly by the European Commission. And you mentioned Horizon Europe before, but also InvestEU and Just Transition Fund, they suffer massive cuts. For example, just to give you a number, Horizon Europe, you were mentioning the initial budget was supposed to be 13.5 billion, while now is 5 billion. So less than half will remain. So what do you think? Like, I agree there is more attention, but is this enough? And then I extend this to Iacopo. Shouldn't we actually doing more in terms of real investment and leave a bit more initiative to the European level?
Yeah, do you want to take it?
I mean, I don't know what to say. It's yes, obviously we should be doing more. I don't know enough about European finances to know what kind of compromises must be made there. I think we often forget how complex the job of negotiators in Brussels is. There are so many different national interests that are conflicting, that take that can slow down negotiations and end up sort of disappointing those parts of the population, those that want more ambitious targets. The most recent example is from Poland and Hungary, sort of holding the agreement on how the recovery fund should be administered. And I mean, if we take the case of Poland, for example, they rely heavily on so different countries in Europe are in very different situations as to how fast they can actually transition to a green economy. And for example, Poland is still heavily reliant on coal, whereas more developed countries such as Germany, they get more of their electricity already from renewables. So we can't really expect countries with such different economies to transition equally fast, and we need to make provisions to help countries that are more behind to transition faster. So overall, I think we should put as much money as possible in the green transition, and also when we decide how to distribute this across different member states, we should prioritize those countries that can make the sort of the biggest emission, where we have the biggest opportunity for emission reductions.
So Iacopo, if you don't mind me jumping in there for a sec, just to follow up to what you've just said. So you guys agree that we should be spending more on the green transition as quickly as possible. And even you've gone further and said it should be focused more on the countries that can do more, which completely makes sense from an environmentalist point of view. But how do you get people behind the idea of investing more money in future generations when we're in the middle of a pandemic and an ongoing crisis? And even more so, how do you get countries like your Polands, your Hungaries, to say, okay, we're gonna, if you can get people to agree, okay, we need to invest in the green transition more than the ongoing crises. How do you then get those countries to allow and agree that more money should be focused on other countries like Germany, who have the strongest economy in the EU? I understand it's because they can do the most, but how do we get the current population, living population, to put their own current interests aside and focus on the green transition?
It's very difficult. Obviously, it has to do with building a European identity, a shared, and building it on the values that we all believe in, on values of solidarity and a shared vision. If we agree that climate change is a shared problem, then we should also accept that the solution may be shared and that some people may have to sacrifice more. But I think so if we take the specific example of Poland again, to illustrate my point, so 80% of Poland's electricity comes from coal, and coal plants must shut because coal is extremely polluting. There's a lot of greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere because of it. But obviously, these coal plants give jobs to hundreds of thousands of Polish people. And these people will have to find new jobs. And I think we often forget how much of an opportunity this green transition may be to actually finding and providing those new jobs, because that's the economy is going towards a green model. It's not only a sort of a political fact, it's also already going in that direction. There is a lot more investment in green technologies now. Nobody is investing in coal anymore. So even if the Polish economy wants to survive, it will have to invest in green technologies. What we need to do is use those funds to make sure that those people who are vulnerable and currently work in industries that are highly polluting have the support they need to transition to retrain and gain those skills that they need to flourish in the new economy.
Okay, perfect. Anna, do you have anything to add on that?
Absolutely no, I second everything that Iacopo said. The only thing I would say is that we do know that this recovery fund is supposed to be answering health and economic crisis, but they are not independent from the climate crisis we're going through. And I think that's very important, and it needs to be communicated. If we are trying to address the way that COVID impacts on health and respiratory problems, then you also need to address pollution, because people in areas that are more prone to air pollution are also more prone to get infected with COVID. So there's a clear relation there. Also, in terms of the economic recovery, precisely as Iacopo said, the risk of continuing to invest in fossil fuel-based, highly polluting industries right now and projects, it's just too big. So no one is doing it anymore. The economy is going to transition, and we need to make sure that it's transitioning in the right way, in a just way, and not leaving anyone behind. I think that's how you get people to support this and to come behind it with clear communication that everything is interrelated, not only the social, the economics, the environmental, the health problems, but also within countries. It is a global problem, and there's no frontiers that can separate the impacts on the climate crisis. So we need to work together. And I think that's where EU comes and can step as an incredible role, because it has, well, and if it's not to be just an economic union, and if it's to be a real union, and then we can work together. It has a congregation of countries that can work together to produce massive change. And that's what I hope to see.
Perfect. So you've touched on the next question I wanted to ask both of you, and I'll leave this open for whoever wants to jump in, and it's to do with energy. So we all know for many years now that coal, other fossil fuels, they're not sustainable. We also know that hydroelectric, wind energy, solar energy, these are much more sustainable fuels. But are there, or more sustainable energies, excuse me. But are there any, can you give us a bit more detail on the different types of energy and just how sustainable and how likely they are to be used effectively? Like we all know fossil fuels are a thing of the past, or they will be very soon. But specifically talking about wind and solar energy, but more specifically talking about nuclear energy, because this is one that I hear a bit of debate about these days, where some people are claiming, I like the smile, it means you have an answer already. Nuclear energy is, from what I'm reading online and talking to some other people who probably know less than you guys, is that some argue it could be a solution. Could you just go through maybe the pros and cons of nuclear, and if there are any hidden negative aspects to solar energy or wind energy that maybe people like Paco and myself and the listeners wouldn't be aware of? Whoever wants to jump in there.
Talking on the different kinds. So one thing that it's, I think, very positive about renewable energies is that it is not one size fits all. So it gives a chance to different countries to use their best natural resources to, and I'm not talking fossil resources, but to put forward the energy they need. It also will require a lot of collaboration, obviously. So I cannot say this source of renewable energy would be better for everyone, because everyone will be different. So you have the example of the UK, where wind is now in parity with electricity from natural gas, which is incredible. In fact, they're not burning coal. I think the most recent results showed that the year that's least amount of coal that's been burned in the UK since before the Industrial Revolution, which is amazing. So it's very interesting. And also in Germany at this point, from solar, and you wouldn't think, well, solar in Germany would make such a big hit, but they are now with incredible results by using solar and panel photovoltaic energy in Germany. So I can't really give you like a recipe that would work for everyone. It needs to be really studied. But one thing that I can say at this point, the one thing that was said a lot about renewables is that the price to pay for them was too big. And at this point, it's not anymore. They are affordable, they're reliable, and they do require investment on a grid that's currently not prepared to have them. But we do have money available now, so why not adapt and make something that could last and be sustainable for the future? That's my first thinking. On the nuclear side, okay, it is very controversial. I think it is it can be seen, and it's been pointed out by a lot of people, as a transition option. I don't think it is an option that could be used for the future. The risks are too big. We're still using, we're still mining and looking for resources. So we're still at some point we'll end up using more than we can. As I said, the price to build, install, secure installations is way too big. The time that's required to build stations is way beyond the time that we have to address climate crisis right now. So I would not support nuclear. At this point, I don't think we need to, because we do have way better options, not even as a transition one. I think we can rely on renewables at this point in a better way. I don't know. I like to see what Iacopo has to say.
So I think the first thing to clarify is the meaning of renewable, right? Because fossil fuels are non-renewable in the sense that sooner or later we will run out of them. We are currently digging more and more places in the oceans and on land to find oil and natural gas in places where it's harder and harder to get. And we are still currently investing in oil companies and gas companies to go and fetch those fuels out of the ground. But sooner or later, in the long term, they will finish. And a similar argument can be made for nuclear, because the reserves of uranium are not infinite, and we haven't solved the problem of how to dispose of them safely everywhere. And this is obviously the main reason why there has been backlash against nuclear. If we instead take hydroelectricity and solar power and wind power, all of these sources are renewable. So the sun will be there for the foreseeable future, at least 5 billion years, I think. And it's the sun that drives the wind, so the wind will always be there. So if we think of human civilization as a long-term project, these are definitely the sources we should be taking our energy from. Having said that, I am not so confident renewable energies will be able to provide all of the energy we require if we keep growing, if the demand keeps growing as fast as it currently is, because our lifestyle is very energy intensive, and there is a mantra of economic growth everywhere around the world, and economic growth is intrinsically coupled with energy demand growth. And we cannot afford to supply all of that energy just with renewables. This is something that engineering researchers everywhere around the world agree on. So together with transitioning to a clean energy supply system, we also need policies to reduce energy demand. And this requires energy efficiency and material efficiency measures, which means, for example, insulating buildings better. But it also means that we have to change our lifestyle. And this is definitely something that is not talked about enough in political circles. If I can go back to a previous question, what gives me the most hope for the future is actually the movements that have sprung up in Europe from the bottom. So the mobilization of the people with the Fridays for the Future movement, and in the UK with Extinction Rebellion. These are absolutely necessary, because besides political action, we also need the will of parts of the population to to say how things are and what we need to change. So, for example, we need to be flying much less, and there has been this phenomenon in Sweden, which is a very special country, of flight shame, where people have started flying less, and this is something we will have to face very, very soon.
That's great. Okay, I think at this point, like if we want to close, I would so close with a question on perhaps hope. So on concretely, what is, in your opinion, the first probably action that needs to be, like, if we had to choose something that can really again make the difference, like at the governmental level, at the commercial level, at the individual level, what is the priority? And let's say, so I give you the keys of the European politics of the next 5 years. What is the first step you would take? And I will start again with Anna. So Anna first and Iacopo second.
It is a big question, very big. I don't know if I'm qualified or to answer that, but I would like to take on something that Iacopo said, and that it's amazing. It is true. The bottom-up movements, the grassroots movements that we've been seeing, and especially from young people. So you're asking before, how can we ask people to change their lifestyles now to for the benefit of future generations? And you see young kids, very, very young, asking for it. They don't care if that's not for them, but they want to see a future. And that abolishment of an egoistic sense of living, it gives me a lot of hope. And so I'm not saying that the full responsibility comes from the individuals, but I know, and that's something I truly believe, that every time you make, you consume, you're casting a vote. You're saying what kind of future you want, you're saying what kind of products you want, you're saying what kind of lifestyle you want. So apart from voting for people who actually have concrete plans and concrete measures, the way we do our lifestyles will have a tremendous impact on their futures. So it is really important to emphasize that, because I feel that a lot of the time, climate crisis can seem overwhelming. You see, oh my God, it's so big. The impacts are worldwide. What can I do? I'm just one person. So it's very interesting to show people, to empower them to see, look, you can make a difference, because if you do not want to buy this anymore, the companies, the way they're working right now, which is to maximize shareholder profit, it's not making profit anymore. They need to change it. When you go to cast your ballot, you're saying what kind of future you want. So I think we really need to pass on this message that this is going to sound so cliche right now, but people do have the power. It is the power. And I think we just need to listen more and to trust ourselves in our individual actions more, because that then can trickle up into actions at a higher level.
Iacopo, anything to add before we finish?
Yes, I'd like to compliment Anna's amazing answer with perhaps the three priorities that I think any government should have to address climate change, which I think are transitioning to a clean energy supply system, electrifying the whole transport system to make it more efficient and to make it powered by renewables, and finally restoring and preserving our natural resources. So keep the trees where they are, put the trees back where they used to be, protect the biggest forests in the planet, and make sure that wildlife thrives there, because these are the resources that will help us keep the climate stable.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much to both of you. Like, I think I really enjoyed this podcast. I think is the kind of podcast I wanted to hear. I think you put so many concepts in such a clear way that really thank you for all of this. And I say goodbye also to our listeners, and like I invite you to the next podcast, which is going to be next week. We will let you know next week what the theme is going to be. So thank you to everyone, and have a nice Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.